Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Peppel and I am the Director of Public Affairs here at Aga Khan Foundation Canada. And I'm very pleased to welcome you to this event, which has a bit of a back-to-school feeling about it, including our version of schoolyard games and clearly overcrowded classrooms. So appropriately, it is our first event of the fall season, and we are delighted to host it in partnership with Right to Play and with support from the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development. I extend a special welcome to our large audience on the webcast, and I'm sorry you were not able to physically participate in our pre-event games, but I trust you will be mentally stimulated by the discussion. Now, discussion and debate underscore the mandate of the delegation of the Ismaili Imamate, where we are holding today's event. When it opened in 2008, His Highness the Aga Khan and Prime Minister Harper expressed the ambition for the building to be a space for the exchange of ideas, collaboration, and reflection on Canada's role in the world. And this mandate has in part been realized through a number of events on such themes as early human development, innovative financing, and maternal and child health. Today's event, Unlocking the Power of Play, marks the first in an ongoing series organized by AKFC on global education. Subsequent events, which will be hopefully held in a larger space, will look at girls' education, monitoring and evaluation, school improvement programs, global citizenship, and tertiary education. As you know, great strides have been made to increase access to education. A quality education from pre-primary through to university and beyond is essential to poverty alleviation, better health, and improved quality of life. But access to quality education goes beyond building schools. It requires knowledgeable and present teachers, community support, and government commitment to ensure students receive an education that will adequately prepare them for the future. Today, we will explore how play-based learning and other child-centered techniques, including those from the Aga Khan Development Network, can improve learning outcomes from the very start of a child's education. To help us understand this approach, we welcome a panel of education champions working tirelessly to improve quality education both in Canada and abroad. To kick us off, I would like to introduce our moderator, Christy Kirka. Christy is an integrated television, radio, and digital reporter for CBC News in Ottawa. She is the weekend anchor for CBC Radio 1, heard at 91.5 FM in Ottawa. Christy holds a Bachelor of Journalism degree from Carleton and appropriately a Bachelor of Education from the University of Ottawa. Christy.
Thank you very much. I have the privilege today of introducing our fine panelists, and we're looking forward to a really rich discussion today. So first I would like to introduce you to them. I'll start off by introducing Dr. Dennis Bright. Dr. Bright has worked out of Accra, Ghana as Right to Play's policy director since 2013. And prior to that, he was Right to Play's regional director for West and Francophonie Africa for 4 years. Dr. Bright is also a former Minister of Youth and Sports in the government of Sierra Leone from the end of the civil war in that country in 2002 until 2007. So please welcome Dr. Bright. I'd also like to welcome Amina Mwitu, and Amina Mwitu is the Program Director of the Madrasa Early Childhood Program, and this program is really dedicated to going into underprivileged communities to provide preschool programs. And before she became the director of the program, she was the Assistant Program Director, the head of the Early Childhood Training Department, and a teacher trainer. So please welcome Amina Mwitu. And we'd also like to welcome Louise Zimani, and she is an international early childhood development advisor, and she also works at the Early Childhood Education Program at Humber's Institute of Technology and Advanced Learning. So please welcome her. And without further ado, we're going to ask Amina to come up, and she'll be the first one to present today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wish to present to you experiences of the Madrasa Early Childhood Program on play and other child-centered methodologies. So Madrasa Early Childhood Program is a program of the Aga Khan Foundation that has been working with communities to promote early childhood development in East Africa. The overall goal of the program is to enhance access to quality basic education and development for children specifically aged 0 to 8 years. For over 30 years of its existence, the Madrasa Early Childhood Program has worked with diverse stakeholders to initiate ECD centers where none existed, as well as working with the government ECD centers or preschool to enhance quality learning outcomes. The program in general has embraced the use of a whole school approach to mobilize parents, communities, and stakeholders in taking active part in school development. The whole school approach involves community sensitization on the importance of early childhood development and the need to mobilize local resources to address educational needs in the preschools. Focus is given to preschool infrastructure, enhancing access, promoting quality teaching and learning, as well as uplifting the quality of school leadership and management. The process culminates in the development of a school plan, stipulating actions to be taken to bring about better development and learning outcomes. So what you see here is actually an example of activities that have been developed through community members coming together to identify the needs in the preschool. And for this particular event, lack of materials for teaching and learning was such a need that was identified. So the parents agreed that they should come together to develop materials. So the work of developing materials is not just left to the teachers who are teaching in the preschools, but is taken up as a community event. So as you can see in the first photo there, those are fathers helping to develop the charts from very local materials. And again, in the second photo, we are having local materials that have been collected from within the local environment, and they are transformed into teaching and learning materials. So the approach ensures community involvement and ownership of the program, hence leading to successful uptake, increased community participation, and eventually sustainability of the ECD programs. The Madrasa Early Childhood Program in East Africa currently supports over 300 community preschool with a significant number of government ECD centers in promoting quality learning. The program has also adapted an active learning methodology from high-scope educational approach and enhanced it with cultural dimensions and the use of low-cost materials. The active learning methodology embraces play and interaction with adults, peers, materials, and events in the construction of knowledge. It is a child-centered approach that is made up of 5 key ingredients. That is materials, manipulation, choice, language, and support. Hence, the acronym Mama Cholasu. For those of us, and in many languages I know, the word mama means mother. So for us, active learning is the mother of quality learning. So teachers are required to provide a wide range of developmentally appropriate, cultural relevant, and low-cost materials, at the same time availing opportunities within the daily routine for the children to play as individuals and in groups, manipulating the materials, using their 5 senses so that they can discover and construct knowledge. Children are encouraged to converse with each other as they play, hence building their language and social skills. In active learning, the child drives the learning process and the teacher takes a facilitative role. Hence, our training programs, preschool curriculum, and the learning environment has a very strong emphasis on interaction with peers, adults, and materials to promote holistic development. Those are just a few slides or photos that are examples of what you will find when you visit a madrasa-supported preschool. Teachers there in small groups with their children, introducing a lesson and concepts, but again you find lots of materials that the children will interact with throughout the lesson for them to be able to learn more, understand better, and yes, in the second one again, some of the materials that you saw being developed by the parents are now in use in the classroom, and the children heavily engaged in play, and the same with the photos that you can see on the lower part of the slide. So in as much as the lessons are activity-based, the preschool daily routine has a specific time block for free play, which we usually refer as free choice or work time, where children are allowed to plan, play, and talk about the play experiences in a meaningful manner. Teachers use this time block creatively to extend learning and to explore concepts in a relaxed and fun way. The outdoor learning environment is also rich with play equipment such as swings, climbing frame, most which are locally made by parents, as well as other materials such as balls, skipping ropes, bean bags, and hoops that are developed by parents for use in the school. The availability of outdoor space for play is a requirement, and each of these community preschools is encouraged to have a safe, open place where children can engage in various types of play. Coming from such a rich background that supports holistic development, children graduating from the madrasa-supported preschools have in the past found it difficult to cope with the new environments and classrooms when they transition into primary grades. We have had instances where children go to the primary school and within a week they come back to the preschool and tell their teacher, you know what, I don't want to go back to that school because the walls are bare. The interactions that they're used to in the preschools are no longer there. They're expected to sit quiet, you know, finger on your lip, no whispering, sometimes a heavy cane waiting for them there, and most of them do not like it. And we were worried that if we don't do something about it, we might lose out on these children. So as a program, we began mapping out the primary school that these children were transiting to at that point in time. And we started discussion forums with the lower primary teachers, with the head teachers, organizing workshops for them to sensitize them on the importance of creating a smooth transition of these children as they move from the preschools to the primary school. A specific focus was given to how children learn and the importance of using materials in lesson delivery and how to source for materials locally from available resources. Parents were also mobilized and brought on board and have since then played a key role in supporting teachers in collecting and developing materials for the lower classes. As a program, we work hand in hand with government education officials to ensure that these lessons and practices are taken to scale and sustained. This initiative has contributed to enhanced transition rates of our preschool graduates to over 90% in our program schools, and the regional figures right now in the coast where our program work is actually over 70%. Retention rates generally have increased, and so is the performance as we continue to monitor these children as they go through their primary schooling and beyond. So these are just, again, photos from the different workshops that we hold with government officials for the lower primary teachers, parents, and primary administrators to sensitize about the value of materials and the importance of play in children's learning. So these are some of the products that you can see here. These are government officers actually on the last day coming for the material display to see the materials that have been developed by the teachers from the government schools. So acknowledging the fact that ECD begins from 0 years, right from prenatal stage, and based on research studies done on brain development and science of early childhood development, we have also begun a pilot for the under 3s based on the UNICEF and World Health Organization Care for Child Development Package, where parents are counseled on play and communication so that children have the best start in life. Rich messages on food, nutrition, care, play and communication are shared with parents, and local games and materials are also explored and used during dialogue session and during dialogue sessions and parents' meetings. For us as a program, this has been a learning journey, and from our experience of working with the communities for the last 30 years, we have come to a stage where, as a program, we have been able to develop an ECD curriculum, not just for the 3 to 6 years in the preschool, but a holistic curriculum that will help any ECD professional to be able to provide better services for the children aged 0 to 8 years. So that is very briefly about our program, and thank you very much.
And Dr. Bright.
My body still doesn't tell me the right time. So I don't know whether to say good afternoon or good evening. Anyway, I'm very happy to be here and to have this opportunity to say a few words in this very, very beautiful place. One of the most beautiful buildings I've been to. And thank you very much to the gentleman who gave us that fantastic introduction to this environment here. I want to thank the Aga Khan Foundation for allowing me to stand here and speak to such an august audience. I remember as a young schoolboy in Sierra Leone in the early 60s, how hard it was to learn. Entering the classroom for most of us, especially those considered to be slow learners or lazy fools, as some schoolmasters would have named them in those days, was like entering a concentration camp to submit to the torture of the rod and the rage of the master, for whom beating the children was justified by the principle that knowledge is too precious a commodity to be gained without pain. Failing to memorize the multiplication tables or times tables, as we used to call it, and recite them on demand, for instance, was sanctioned by strokes of the cane. We were reminded always that the rod was made for the back of fools. This thing is coming off. We were reminded that the rod was made for the back of fools, and that if you spare the rod, you spoil the child. On hindsight, I don't think these teachers were really bad people. Nor were our parents, who saw corporal punishment as a facilitator of the learning process, and a reliable tool in character building. This is what they knew. Teachers were the owners of knowledge, and it was their mission to impart it into the children, using force if necessary. And whatever pain they inflicted on us was for our own good. And so it was that many years later, when I was serving as a government minister, Mr. Martin, my former math teacher, one of the most feared masters in my primary school, paid me a visit in my office. This is a true story. He was jubilant, celebrating his product, as he called me, a living testimony to the benefits of teaching and learning the hard way. He never saw me for what I was, one of the few survivors of the pedagogy of pain. Standing here before you, I may give the impression of a confident man, but I am still in many places of life a very fragile person, haunted by the fears and worries of my childhood. And as those who know me well will tell you, I am also a total disaster in math. Never mind Mr. Martin's celebration. Unfortunately, corporal punishment still exists in some of our schools, even though children are now being defended by international laws, conventions, and advocacy. Unfortunately, school is still a place that many pupils would rather avoid if they could, simply because learning is not a fun experience, especially when they don't have the benefits of going through the kind of preparation in early childhood that Amina was talking about. Interestingly, teaching doesn't seem to be much fun for the teachers either. Over the past decade, the world has made great efforts to get children into school. Between 1999 and 2010, 43 million more children enrolled in primary schools in sub-Saharan Africa. And in the same period, the enrollment rate, the net enrollment rate rose from 58% to 76%. This is remarkable. Unfortunately, enhancing education quality has not enjoyed the same progress due to poor educational quality and other reasons. The children, especially girls, drop out before they can complete their primary education. And even more alarming is the fact that among the 250 million children in the world who cannot read, write, or count properly, 130 million are enrolled in school and are clearly not learning the basics. Ghana has comparatively one of the best educational systems in Africa, maybe after Kenya. But even in that country in 2008, listen, more than half of women and more than a third of men ages 15 to 29 who had completed 6 years of school could not read a single sentence. This is UNESCO. This is a bad situation. This is why UNESCO reckons that improving quality will need to be more central to the post-2015 global development framework. Being education experts, that is many of you here, seated here, you all know that factors such as teacher-pupil ratio, training, teacher qualification, employment conditions, infrastructure, nutrition, learning material, a good syllabus, all these can contribute immensely to a high-quality education. But my interest is in the meeting point between the teacher and the learner, and in what play does not only to make this meeting possible, but to make learning really happen. When all other conditions for quality education have been satisfied, if the quality of relationship between the teacher and the pupil is poor, and the teaching methods are based purely on the knowledge, power, and authority of the teacher, the chances are that the children would lose interest and learning would become difficult. I started off by telling you about Mr. Martin and his use of the rod. Many years later, I came to realize how much more effective the ball is than the switch in making children learn. How play makes learning easier, transforming everything and everyone in the process. For more than a decade now, Right to Play has been training teachers in communities around the world on how to use sport and play as part of their teaching methods. Many of them have been sharing their experiences and giving testimonies on how much more they are able to bring out of the children when they use play. It is the story of the timid girl in the corner who becomes a team leader in the playground. It is the story of the aggressive boy who becomes an active organizer of the game. The story of the child who asks his or her first question after a game. Play has the effect of releasing the free, inquiring spirit in the child and making the learning process an exercise of shared responsibilities and one that is both effective and enjoyable. This is exemplified by the fact that following the rehabilitation of play spaces and Right to Play activities in areas of Rwanda, school attendance rates jumped 43% in 1 year. Furthermore, in Ghana, Benin, and Mali, students surveyed scored 23% higher on cognitive tests than those who were not involved in Right to Play programs. But wait a minute, it is not only the child that changes. Some of the teachers are amazed at how they themselves are changed by play. As the barriers fall down and the myths are broken. In fact, what actually happens is not just the breaking of myths, but rather a conversion of roles. As the teacher, through play, connects with the individual child as well as the group in a way that requires him to be more than a teacher, more of a coach who believes in and brings out the winner in the child. Right to Play training programs are designed in such a way that the teacher's success depends on how well he is able to combine the knowledge and skills of a teacher with the care, concern, and techniques of a coach. Play is the secret. So I'm not surprised that play is now being increasingly used by teachers in classroom situations. I recently witnessed a teacher in Rwanda starting a social studies lesson about national unity with a three-legged race and discussions about how lessons learned from the game can be applied to their society and their everyday lives. The lesson was completed with group work and pupils acting as group leaders and rapporteurs who within a short time had discussed with their teams and basically taught the entire lesson with hardly any further input needed from the teacher. For me, it has been a unique privilege to work with those trained staff, teachers, and community coaches who have been using play to transform the school environment from a place of fear and terror to a haven of fun and discovery. In my part of the world where electricity and technology are yet to reach most of the population, play has a very important contribution to make towards the education of our children. Right to Play has been using it in several countries to support the holistic development of the child. Until recently, most of our educational systems laid emphasis on the cognitive, the study of subjects, maths, geography, science, and relied on teacher-centered pedagogical practices. Not much attention was paid in the school system to the nurture of the whole personality of the child through the learning of essential life skills, those skills that would make them cope in a world that is gone crazy. So I thought it was brilliant that organizations like Right to Play were taking up that aspect of education, using play to not just teach, but to coach our children to acquire self-esteem, confidence, respect of rules, teamwork, the ability to communicate, and the capacity to lead. Evaluations of Right to Play programs are showing that parents, teachers, and community leaders are beginning to notice and appreciate the positive changes they are seeing in the behavior of children who take part in the activities. The fact is that each game is a well-structured physical, mental, social, and emotional exercise in a procedure that is called RCA, reflect, connect, and apply. The children do an appraisal of their game experience in a question and answer session with the coach. I think some of us were treated a little bit to that outside before coming in. They reflect on the game, connect the learning gained from it to their own context or situation, and commit themselves, and this is important, commit themselves to apply what they have learned to their daily lives. Not surprisingly, some children go home and question unhealthy and unhygienic behavior of their parents and siblings, and are better prepared to resist negative peer pressure. Play-based learning is action-oriented. We should also not forget that by using play to empower children to deal with issues affecting them and their community, such as disease, child abuse, illiteracy, and gender violence, we are in fact enabling them to be active participants in their own development and the development of their communities, and not as mere beneficiaries, as they've always been before. Finally, one encouraging sign is that governments in Africa are beginning to move away from, the old school traditional pedagogy to more modern activity-based child-centered approaches. And if you just refer to Amina's photographs, and even the sitting arrangement in that place is showing you that it is changing from Mr. Martin's style of standing there with a cane ready to pounce on you when you make the slightest mistake. It's changing. So the government of Benin, for instance, has embraced play-based learning as a critical aspect of preschool education, and we've seen another example here. While Rwanda's proposed basic education curriculum is presented as a child-centered and competency-based one. In the past 4 months, I have been visiting ministries of education in Rwanda, Benin, and Ghana, discussing how we can help to introduce play into the education systems and support them to make the shift towards a more activity-based and child-centered pedagogy. For quality education to be achieved globally, there should be a concerted action by policymakers, donor partners, universities, education agencies, and experts to support programs that seek to enhance the holistic development of children in safe and secure environments, and to promote learning through the use of child-centered, activity-based approaches, including play and sport. Play is important in life. It changes the way we relate to one another and vehicles a lot of values and lessons that can be life-saving. When the teacher is trained to use it well, he becomes a coach, deeply interested and connected to the life and dreams of the children and seeking to bring out the winner in them. I don't like it when teachers in Africa are blamed for their pupils' mass failure in exams. First of all, they are poorly paid. I was a teacher once. And then they are miserably equipped. Furthermore, I don't think their job can be an exciting one if they continue to be trained in the same old boring teacher-centered methodologies that have to be regularly reinforced with physical punishment, as in the days of Mr. Martin. Play-based learning can bring to the teacher and the child a new experience of care, mutual respect, trust, and above all, fun. That is why I am so much in favor of unlocking the power of play. I want to thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Dennis and Amina. So one of the things that the bio didn't say was that I've spent the last 25 years, yes, I'm teaching now, early child educators at Humber, but what I've been doing for the last 25 years, I've worked or traveled to over 40 countries, always in the capacity of early childhood development, whether it be working with children, working with parents, policymakers, leaders, donors, community leaders, governments, to help get a broader understanding of the importance of early childhood development. And it reminded me, actually, Amina reminded me, just because of her work with the Aga Khan Foundation. I worked with the Aga Khan Foundation in the early 90s, and we were actually working with children in grade 4 and 5. It was based on the child-to-child methodology that children learn best from other children. So the idea was to look at the kind of learning in the grade 4 or 5 classroom with the goals in mind of improving health outcomes through games, through drama, through song, through community visits, all kinds of active learning, so that they in turn would actually teach some of these health goals to their younger siblings. And we had to go and visit a school outside of Booney. We traveled three or 3.5 hours in the Jeep, and then we had to walk into the school. And I tried to find the photo of me. I couldn't find the photo. It was a few moons ago, but I'll describe it to you. So here is what I thought was a raging river, okay? So it's a big raging river, and there are 2 bridges, which are essentially 2 logs going this way, and then there's a bridge that sort of goes another way, 2 logs going this way. And no railings, and just a little sort of like ladder thing where you go like this across the bridge, and then you walk to the school. And these boys were sent, the grade 4 or 5 boys were sent to meet us. And they were running up and down this bridge, laughing, carrying on, and there was I having to walk, and I was like and my fear made them laugh more. Right? And in fact, what ended up happening was, like, I was so terrified to go, because it was actually quite high and it was a fast-moving river, that without me actually asking them, one of them walked in front of me and one of them walked behind me, and we walked slowly across the bridge and we got to the school. And so I have a great photo of me, I don't know where the kids are, walking across this bridge. So all to say that I think that we learn best, actually, or children learn best from other children. So I wanted you to actually have a look at these 5. I'm going to show you 5 photos, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happening in Ontario with early learning, but then I'm going to actually talk a little bit more about advocacy at the global level, given the United Nations are now in General Assembly, and what's happening around early childhood development and global advocacy. So Okay, this one's a little bit dark. So, oh, sorry. I don't actually know how this is worked. Let me go back to the beginning. Hang on a second. Oh, sorry. I don't know which way the arrow is pointing, but if you could get me back. So is it this one right here? Okay. So just have a look at what this girl is doing and look across. Do you see that person at the other end? She's the one blowing the bubbles. Okay, what you don't see here is there are actually other children coming in at her because they want to be the first to poke the bubble. Okay, so look at that. This one's a little bit dark. I don't know if you can see, it's because the lights are on, if you can see who's underneath that big ball. Can you see? It's really hard to see. There's a 4-year-old holding that big ball and ready to throw it to the instructor. And you can't really see her face, but she's absolutely focused on holding this big ball up. So just look at what they're doing. Here. And I'll just go back. So the first one here. Oh, okay. So all of them show actually a focus and an engagement in what they're doing. And that is one of the 4 foundations I brought here that are built around 3 documents that the Ontario government, in consultation with many who are working in the field, research, theory, practice, and people who are working in the field with children from birth to 8, around how do we best make sure that children are learning, how do we engage educators, how do we engage families, and the 4 foundations are really built around what children do naturally. They want to engage. They want to build connections. They want to connect with others. There's a sense of work that they do around their physical and their mental well-being, and also the way they communicate and they express. And so what has happened in these 3 sets of guiding documents are how do we ensure a continuum of development from 0 to 8? How do we support educators? I work with early child educators from coming right out of high school, but also people are coming back into the field, and how do we engage them in the types of learning that will promote the best learning for children? How do we do that? And the Ontario Early Years, How Does Learning Happen? The ELECT document, which is learning for every child connected today, and also research that looks at how best do children learn. And I think some of the things that we are really looking at in Ontario are what are the best outcomes. Amina talked a little bit about the early years and the link to grades 1 and 2, which is really important. And I think that the sort of 3 guiding frameworks also look at, you know, how do we best look at learning inside, outside, nature? There's a growing movement around how do we take learning outside and use nature? And I think a lot of programming that Right to Play and Aga Khan Foundation do is looking at how to use the outside classroom for learning. One of the things that we've been doing as a global community is how do you ensure that what we know about early childhood development gets into a post-2015 or Millennium Development Goal, Sustainable Development Goal framework. So what's been happening over the last 18 months to 2 years is that the global community is looking at post-2015, there are these set of 8 goals that either are going to look the same, be revised, or maybe completely different. And how do we as the early childhood community, knowing that we know a lot about brain science, we know about the return on investment, the return on investment in early childhood is greater than if you invest in primary or secondary school. So we know about brain development, we know about economics, we know about the impact of good learning on later learning, on health outcomes. But why is it that, when the Millennium Development Goals were created, early childhood development was not as visible? It's visible in terms of ensuring children survive, but all the things that put them at risk for survival also put them at risk for development. So in the debates that have been happening in the last 2 years, there's been the UN high-level panel, there's been the open working group where the governments are coming together to decide what should a global set of goals look like. They're all in New York right now. They're going to be debating this global document that gets put together and released in November, and then they will all come to agreement on what these goals should look like. So how do we as the early childhood community advocate, say, well, early childhood development is very important. How do you measure it? How do you get it into these 8 goals? How do you get a community to decide what are the key messages? Why is it important? How do you measure it? How are you going to fund it? The Ontario government has put an enormous amount of resources into these guiding frameworks, and people are using them across Ontario, and there are models for other places across Canada and actually being used globally as well. So how do we decide what are the key messages, who are we going to tell the message to, and how do we ensure that post-2015 early childhood development is a central component? The Open Working Group on Sustainable Development Goals came out with their outcome document, and what we were really pleased about was we advocated very hard that the word children comes in the first page. Because in fact, earlier documents, children were actually not even mentioned in the first part of the document. Women were mentioned, youth were mentioned, but children weren't mentioned, and certainly not early childhood development. But what we have done is I've put together, actually we'll show you a little video. It's a 3-minute video, and it was specifically put together to help member states understand what are the key messages around early childhood development. We showed it, the longer version, at the UN in June. 150 countries, or 150 people came, about half of them the member states. Maybe what we could do is we could queue, and then maybe during the questions we could have more discussion around what sort of the outcome of this particular messaging.
Every day the world becomes more connected, more informed. By working together, the global community can ensure that all children have an equal chance to develop to their full potential. We can reduce the intergenerational transmission of poverty, poor health, and family and environmental stress, thereby helping advance all development goals. Investing in early childhood development is a key pathway to both the 3 principles of sustainable development and the 4 pillars of the post-2015 framework. Early childhood is the most critical phase of human development because children's brains and bodies are developing at an unprecedented rate. Inequalities in child development begin even before birth due to poverty and other risks and can be irreversible. Policies and interventions that target all, but especially the most disadvantaged children, can reduce inequality. Improving children's lives also means helping parents secure decent jobs with stable pay. Supporting young children and their parents leads to significant returns on investment, helping reduce the number of children worldwide not developing to their potential. If children receive these 8 things by age 8, pre- and postnatal care, birth registration, and a protective environment free of violence, immunization, developmental screening and ongoing follow-up, adequate and appropriate nutrition, a hygienic, healthy, and safe environment, home and community-based parent and family support programs, 2 years of quality preschool programs, and quality early grades of primary school that include transition programs to grade 1. Then, we can ensure that children become healthy, happy, productive adults more likely to earn higher incomes and provide better opportunities for their own children. Long before children take their first steps, there are things we can do to make sure they reach their full potential in life. We need multiple sectors and multiple partners, all interested in promoting equitable and sustainable development to invest in the social and economic growth of a country, of the global community. And when we do that for more children globally, we take more steps together towards eradicating the injustices of poverty, inequality, and discrimination, and towards achieving all development goals. Focus global development on developing children.
So one of the things that we really worked hard to do was to show that early childhood development, that all those things, that play and family support, all the things that you don't see in those global documents. In fact, the word parent family is not mentioned in any of the global documents that have come out in the past 2 years that are helping to inform the governments about the importance of early childhood development, or inform the goals in general. So parents and families are not listed in there. Young children are not even mentioned, actually. So we've made some progress in terms of children, but I think it's been a real hard battle to help the health sector understand the importance of early childhood development to learning, or the education community to understand the impact of health and how they are helping support and leverage health outcomes. And that early childhood development for us is not a special interest issue. It is a cross-cutting issue that helps achieve all global development goals, and that the narrative of a global document should be a life cycle approach, that you start from the beginning. You start with parents. You start with women who are going to have their babies, and then you support them all the way along, so that ultimately we get to a community that is well supported and the children are well supported. So I would be very interested, we can talk a little bit more about some of the work that we've been doing around that, but I think, you know, for the early childhood community, the value of play is sort of the symbol and the metaphor for what we're trying to do, because play is not always seen as serious business, and it is serious business. It is the business of the field of early childhood development. It's so important that the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the Committee on the Convention on the Rights of the Child, created what's called a General Comment 7, because what they found was when member states and countries were reporting on whether they were meeting the rights of children, Canada included, they report on a regular basis. What they found was that countries were not reporting on some of the early childhood development pieces and not reporting on play. So there are actually specific general outcome and guidelines to help countries report on how they are meeting children's needs in early childhood development and in play. So, thank you.
All right, so thank you very much, Louise and Dennis and Amina. We really appreciate all of the insight that you're bringing to the table today. We're going to now move into our moderated discussion. So essentially what's going to happen, I'm going to ask a few questions, and then our speakers are going to contribute. And while they're speaking, what I'm going to ask you to do is to kind of put on your own thinking caps and think about questions that you would like to raise, because after the moderated discussion portion of the program, we're going to be turning it over to you, both in person and as well the people that are watching online are going to have an opportunity to contribute to the conversation as well. So I'll ask you to just start to get your minds rolling in terms of questions that you might want to put to our panelists today. So I'm going to start off. This is first question for the moderated discussion. Maybe we could talk about some of the challenges, the major challenges of advancing quality education and how play-based learning helps to combat some of those challenges. So I'm going to get Amina to start. What do you think some of the major challenges are to advancing quality education?
Okay, thank you. Really reflecting on the countries where we are working, and based on what we have seen over the years, what is the main challenge as far as advancing quality of education is concerned is the amount of financing that is actually dedicated to the education sector. As far as the governments are concerned, there are so many competing priorities, especially in the third world countries. Health is an issue, roads and so on and so forth. So in as much as they understand the importance of education, the amount of money that is allocated towards educational advancement is very, very little. And again, looking at how that little portion is spent, you know, quite a large percentage of it goes back to recurrent costs, such as salaries. So very little gets to the schools and to the child that is intended to be the beneficiary of this particular fund. And not to mention a part of it which will disappear into people's pockets and so on and so forth. So these are some of the challenges that have been affecting the whole process of really trying to bring in quality in the classroom. Again, we are looking at the teacher's capacity to deliver, as we have heard from our colleague Dennis here, that the methodologies that are being used in the classroom today are the same methodologies that were being used 30 years ago. You know, there is research that has been conducted as far as education is concerned, but because most of the time, after the initial teacher training that is done, there isn't much professional development for the teachers that is given. So sometimes you find a teacher who has been in practice for the last 30 years, but they've not had any kind of refresher course, so to speak. So it's the same kind of all the theories, all methodologies that are being used in the classroom that are not helping us. So what we are saying is that if we are able to mobilize other stakeholders, not just relying on the money that is coming from the government, if we mobilize parents, if we mobilize businessmen, if we mobilize stakeholders who can come in to the schools to help us, if we can look at what we have within the communities, the resources that we can bring to the schools to help to turn into teaching and learning materials, or the kind of play and games from the local communities that we can bring to the school to help advance teaching, learning, and bring about quality outcome, is going to help in a big way. And of course, we need to look at the whole issue of building the capacity of teachers if we are to take this agenda to the next level. Yeah.
I'll get both of you to weigh in. Maybe Dennis first. What do you think some of the major challenges are, and how play-based learning could help to combat some of the challenges?
Right now, if we want to be honest, most teachers don't want to be teachers. A lot of them are just hanging in there, you know, waiting for opportunities to go off to something else, because the whole profession is not attractive anymore. Many of them will tell you, and I think Amina will agree with me, that many of them will tell you that, and it's not just about the conditions of service, it's not just about salaries, it's about the whole perception of the teacher, you know. It's not a profession that young people really think is exciting, you know, that they want to do. It's not like, you know, it's not like the others. So the reason, one of the reasons, and this is why we're insisting, that for quality education there are so many components. There is the infrastructure, you know, like the space you create for the children, I mean the health facilities, the nutrition, you know, and then there is the curriculum itself, you know, the programs, which have to be reviewed. They're doing some work on that now. But there's also teacher training, which is a big problem. Because the problem of quality begins with teacher training. If the teachers don't have the real pre-service and in-service training opportunities, then of course it's going to have an effect on the entire system and the children won't learn. I know of cases in which some teachers just don't go to school. They start appearing around school at the time when they should get their salary. And they find all sorts of reasons, to be away. They are sick, their auntie is dead, and something. Because the school space itself is no longer conducive for them, to go and enjoy their work. That is the problem. And we need to begin to think seriously about what we do. Because these are the ones who are producing the human resource for our countries. And what is going to be the status of all these countries if we don't invest in changing the perception of this profession and making it attractive for people to go? I was telling somebody that I think post-2015, we should declare a decade for the teacher. Yes, a decade for the teacher, so that we begin to look at all the departments of the problems that we're having. Because if we are able to look at the teacher situation to the extent that young people like these who are coming up can decide that I want to go into that profession and not necessarily looking for something that is more exciting, maybe we'll be able to save the world. Otherwise, it's just the same old thing. And Mr. Martin will not die. You see? So this is my own way of looking at it. Mr. Martins will continue. They won't die. The guys just go there and do the basic that they can do, because it's not because they are not conscious of the importance of what they should be doing. It's just not interesting. I mean, if you have to read a book, and every year you copy the same notes with your chalk on the board for the children to copy in their books, if you do that for 1 year, you can survive. You do that for the second year, the same notes, you may just about stay alive. But if you do that for 3 years, you either go mad or you go crazy. And some people are in that job for 15, 20 years, doing the same old thing. They're just like zombies now. And poor children, they have to undergo this kind of problems. And some of the things that are taken we're talking about taking things for granted. If we had a little bit of some of the training that some of the teachers here have, we will go very far. So we have to begin to look now. You see, it's very easy to measure how many chairs have been given, how many buildings have been constructed, and everything. But it's very difficult to account now and measure, how many aminas have been reproduced, or that sort of thing, and how many. It's very difficult. So the development partners tend to concentrate more on those things that they can have their, figures and everything, and it's okay. We now have constructed so many things. But you would have fantastic buildings, wonderful places. But as I say, if we don't look at whether learning is actually taking place, we don't look at the relation between the teacher and the learner, like you were saying, what we do to invest in learning to take place, then I think the Mr. Martins, as I say, will continue to live.
So you're saying that educators can benefit from the power of play as well?
This is where educators are made by play, even if they don't realize it. They are beneficiaries of play, and they are made by play, because the children do teach us, the teachers, and I think you said that, and you said that. The children teach us a lot of things. Some teachers who have a very funny thing may not want to admit it, but we do learn a lot from the children. And if we open our minds, we'll be able to learn more. So some kind of humility has to play here on some of our parts as educators to be able to benefit from the huge resources that we have in our children. And there's a value game that plays that you begin to value the children. And I think if you value the children, then they regard you highly. And it does help, you know, that kind of chemistry.
How about you, Louise?
I mean, maybe just to build a little bit on what Dennis was saying in terms of the pre-service, the training that teachers get before they enter the classroom often doesn't include, well, they are taught the way they teach in the class. If you teach activity-based, learner-based, center-based teaching, that's the way they'll teach in their classroom. But if they have no model for it, it is really difficult. And they're not learning about child development. How best do children learn? Up to age 8, they learn through concrete materials, smaller groups. Even if you went from a class from 100 to 40, 50, here that would be a big class, 50, 60. In many of the classrooms, the primary classrooms, are 100, 125, 140. With one teacher that's untrained. Some of the best teachers I've seen weren't trained teachers, actually. They intuitively knew how to work with children. Maybe they had less resources, but in fact it was they were actually working better with the children than the trained teachers. But I think Amina mentioned a little bit about the power that parents have on their children's learning. Because if you look, I mean, if we had parents as a constituent, a global constituency, we wouldn't actually have a global development framework that didn't include children as primary to it, other than survival, because they know what they want for their children. And you talked about it in your context in Nepal. There were quite a few preschools, early childhood centers that were running really well. When those children went to school, they came back home and said, we're not going back to school, we hate school, we don't want to go. The parents went to the primary school and said, and they were a powerful force. They changed what was happening in the primary schools because they said, you know, we're not bringing our kids to school unless we want what you did over there. And we want the connection between what happens when our children leave here and when they go. And it did, and it was the parents who changed that. And they pushed the ministry, and they pushed the community leaders to make sure that that happened. I think that's, it's an untapped area, because they only want good things for their children.
Did you want to weigh in again about the power of parents?
Yeah, much has been said, but yeah, like Louise said, parents know what they want in their children, and sometimes what it really takes is to sensitize them further on these issues. For instance, when we're talking about play, most of the time in the earlier days when they used to come to the preschool, for instance, and see that it's full of materials, and you know, they used to consider that as junk. And most of them will question, when will these children learn, you know? And some of them within a term, they will expect that their children will learn how to write and speak English, very high expectation. What we did was to bring these parents together to the classroom and make them experience the different learnings that children are able to get once they are engaging in the different kinds of play. So we had parents playing in the home corner, others in the construction area, creative area, some outdoor dancing, and you know, the local songs. And at the end of, after 30 minutes, we gathered them back together and we were like, yes, tell us, how does it feel? And everybody was like, wow, so refreshing. And okay, I learned this, I learned that. And it was quite powerful. And at the end of the day, we were able to prove to them that there's so much learning within play. If as adults, you were able to do so much within this period, what about the children? So, yeah, once
so you
parents are,
them.
Yes, convinced that it works, then they buy it and they're able to participate anytime. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move on to our next question. How can play-based methodologies be used in emergency or humanitarian settings for child and youth development? And I'll get Louise to lead this one off.
I think a lot of what's happening in situations where there's emergencies, a lot of the organizations have child-friendly spaces that they're set up for helping, well, first of all, to provide a safe environment for children and parents or caregivers to come, but it helps provide a sense of normalcy back to what can often be very traumatic. Often the children are separated from their parents, they're not with necessarily other siblings, so the child-friendly spaces really provide a way for children to play. It actually really helps the adults as well, because a lot of the needs are met, like the health needs are met, but the psychosocial, the emotional needs are not met necessarily in emergency situations, and particularly for children who have no language or can't express a lot of the emotional trauma that they're going through. So a lot of the centers will have materials for for a mixed age range. Sometimes they'll be set up near the health clinic, but it really provides a sense of normalcy in a time where there's not much routine, and so it's quite growing, I think.
Dennis, do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I mean, basically it's just to confirm what Lisa said. In many humanitarian settings, the situation of parents is very, very serious. I mean, especially, take like refugees, people who have been uprooted from their normal lives and find themselves in a strange country, living in very difficult conditions, in exile and things like that. It's very difficult if you've never been moved from your own place of abode in such difficulty. I come from a background where we had 11 years of war, and I had to leave my country twice to go into self-imposed exile, but there was a time you had to go through a whole corridor of boy soldiers, child soldiers, holding guns that were taller than them, and if you go in with your children through that kind of traumatic experience and find yourself in a place of relative calm, temporary calm, you have 24 hours of nothing to do, and your children are there, nothing to do for 24 hours. The very first thing that play can do is to, especially if it's organized, is to occupy the children. And then there's nothing more precious than the laughter of children in those circumstances, because it gives the parents some hope, some feeling that something, hope is there. And the children can brighten up the lives of the people, albeit temporarily. It's very important, but then it can also help to bridge, this problem, this gap that you can have in their education, so that they don't lose contact with the learning process. And the learning process can continue, maybe not in the same circumstances. So it does help a lot. And you can use the opportunity, like we've used in our own programs, to deal with very serious issues like difference, like conflict and peace. If you want to cut this vicious cycle, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. It's always good to plant the seeds of peace in children who are in that situation of war. Otherwise, you just lose them. By the time they get into adolescence, you lose them to the other side. I mean, the other side, that means to handle the gun and to kill. So play can be a very important component of the education. Whatever education system can be established within very difficult circumstances, humanitarian settings being one of them.
And Amina, I'll just get you to weigh in quickly on maybe how strategies need to be adapted in those types of emergency or humanitarian settings.
Well, I think my colleagues first put it very well about really the whole importance of play and the schooling bringing that sense of normalcy and bringing that sense of hope in the parents. In terms of making adaptations, emergencies and things like war are really things that you cannot plan for. So it's very critical that whoever is handling that emergency situation assesses and makes the best use of what is available at that particular point in time to bring people together and to be able to bring back hope to the people, both to the children and to the parents. That is what I can say for now, because it's not something you plan for in the first place, but it needs a lot of creativity and a lot of, calm in handling the whole issue, yes.
Okay, I think we're going to move over to the question portion of the program. We're going to let the audience maybe throw you some questions. So do we have a first person for a question?
I would like the easier ones. Easy
Oh.
questions. Only the easy questions.
So she's going to be coming around with a microphone, and I guess what I'll ask you to do is just to say your name.
Okay.
Feels like we're on a talk show. Say your name and then
My
ask the
name's
question.
Ainsley. I'd like a car. Just like a question for Amina. You said your program's been going for a while. Can you speak a little bit about the difference that happened, or how you had to adjust your programming, and how your program might have influenced the Kenyan government when they opened universal primary education, like free primary education, and how that changed your programming, and if you tried to influence what they programmed?
Yeah, thank you very much. In 2003, the government of Kenya introduced the free primary education into the primary schooling. And what we saw was a high influx of children into the primary schools. And some did not even have the preschool background. So here is a teacher in grade 1 with 150 children. Half of them have preschool background, half of them do not have. Many of them are overaged, and it was a whole mix of confusion. So what we did through our transition initiative again was to kind of introduce aspects that will help the teachers to cope with the problem. So apart from the transition themes that we had, like how children learn, like the material development, we went ahead and did like a needs analysis with the teachers on the areas that they needed help in. And some of them will identify like do you handle a large classroom where you have 150? You know, I'm trained to handle about 30 or 40, and here I am. How do I cope with this? So we started introducing topics that will help them to deal with the situation. We also emphasize on the different strategies that they could use in terms of the group work, in the different activities, and so on. And again, what we are closely working we are also closely working with the county governments right now, like to assist one way or another in terms of putting up more classrooms, getting teacher assistants, you know, introducing the shift system where children come in either in the morning, in the afternoon, to kind of lessen the burden. Otherwise, our work with the government primary schools and the ECD schools still continues, and we are hoping that with the enrollment now coming in a timely manner, these problems will kind of be reduced, and some sense of kind of normalcy will come into the classroom. Otherwise, yeah, it was tough for the teachers, and not much learning was going on at all. Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have another question? Don't be shy. Oh. No one here in person? Okay.
Hi, my name is Edna Mae McKenzie. I guess it's more of an insight or an inspiration. Thank you for all the inspirations. Recently, one of the theories of play that I really enjoy is the opposite of play is not work. The opposite of play is depression. And I hear you speaking of the teachers and of the children. And when I hear of the teachers, their work, then in that same theory, work is adult play. And these adults are not at play. And there's inspiration to go in there and helping them be playful. I've done trainings with after-school workers and daycare workers, and I realized at first I was hired to teach games. But then by the end, or by maybe the first 10 minutes, I realized that I was there to teach them to be playful and how to be playful. And I'm seeing probably these poor teachers are come up with Mr. Martin and have no inspirations of playfulness. So to be able to teach it, they're lost. But the opposite of work or the opposite of play being depression, I find beautiful, and seeing how these teachers are depressed in their jobs and need to be inspired by play.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you have a specific question too, just about maybe?
No, I'm not a...
Comment.
No?
But I don't know if there's training, how the training of the teachers, or is play being the right to play for the children or on the right to play for the teachers? Somehow, is that being, or how that can be done, or has that been done?
You see, all this is a movement. Using sport and play for development is going through some kind of a curve. In the earlier days, nobody understands what you're talking about. Because basically for this kind of antithetical situation, you have play and then you have serious business. And play is what you do when you don't have something serious to do. This is what you understand. And this is starting from policymakers, decision makers. This is the conception that we have. I mean, a lot of our generation were taught to be serious, very serious. So when you bring play, I remember the day I took balls into a cabinet meeting. At that time, I'd met Yuan Kos at the time, but I was still in government. And it was like revelation that I knew there was something in this thing, but I could not articulate it myself. It was somewhere in me that play cannot just be just play, or sport cannot just be just sport. But then they had been working on it, and they could articulate it better. So I dug myself into it. Instead of reading official papers, I was reading about this play and things and that sort of thing, which was not the correct thing I was doing, but spending time reading about play and sport, that was not serious business, was it? But I went deeper and deeper into it, and I saw, because if you have children of your own, and you've been subjecting them to swatting all the time, and then you have this problem with them all the time, and then you have a period of detente with them, and then you see how close they come to you and everything. It should teach you that you really need to relax a little bit to be able to get the best out of them, rather than if you hang over them with a stick and that sort of thing. So I would go inside the cabinet meeting with the ball, and then the president says, "What is this?" It's a ball, sir. This is a ball. Yeah. Oh, your business, please. We have serious things to do. So it's a hard fight to get even policymakers to understand that play is important. But the most important, and I think that was the question I was asked, is the parents. Because the parents want the best for their children. And if they have this mentality that they are wasting time when they're playing, you find out that those will be the first opposition people to play in the home. And that could be disastrous. Because if you have a Mr. Martin in class, in school, and you come home, and your parents don't want you to relax a little bit, then it's a very serious issue. So what you're saying now is that there is a mentality problem vis-a-vis that, and sometimes it's cultural, social, or that sort of thing. But I believe that the more we involve parents into this, you know, I think the better it becomes, because it's really a matter for the parents now. And we have seen parents like the women in Gisenyi, in one of our projects. Gisenyi is a part very near the Congo border in Rwanda. They couldn't get their girls to come out, and they didn't want their girls to come out and play, and that so the boys could go there. And so one of our fantastic members of staff just thought about this crazy idea to get the women to form, the mothers, to play football, soccer. And of course, everybody thought she was crazy, but then she got them. Maybe that's the very first time, those women have ever done anything as crazy as that. The very fact of doing something crazy in front of their husbands, watching them playing in the field, that was the first sense of liberation they had. Now, the mothers formed football teams, and in all the 7 villages, they had football teams, and they are playing with their daughters and that sort of thing. It's sometimes a therapy for a lot of people living in very difficult circumstances play, and it does help. You can see that Mr. Martin's kind of teacher. I talk and monopolize time and everything, so she wouldn't like me if I continue talking.
Channeling a little bit of Mr. Martin, keeping to the time. Thank you so much for the discussion today. We really appreciate it, and thank you all for listening. And I'd just like to welcome for closing remarks Evelyn Guidon. She is the Vice President of International Programs for the Right to Play.
You guys say that this is my boss.
It's pretty hard to boss him around. Wow, this has been an amazing evening, and I am so very, very grateful to all of you for having come and joined us, and to have played with us, and to have learned with us, and to have engaged in this most amazing discussion. So I want to start by thanking Christy, and to all of the people who joined us in person and via the web to learn, discuss, and really experience the incredible power of play for learning. And as you know, Right to Play has been working for just over 12 years. We're now teenagers ourselves, and what we've been doing is working to create that healthy and safe world through the power of sport and the power of play. And we've seen tremendous impact. And we've seen that play-based learning can what the impact it can have on children, especially girls, and their communities. And it was great to hear about these wonderful examples that have been brought out through this discussion. And a major reason why these efforts are so successful is because we don't work on this alone. As you can see from what you've heard here tonight, we're part of a movement. And this is a movement of many different people, many organizations who are committed to ensuring that all children and youth have the right to learn, to be healthy, and to lead through the power of sport and play. And I think it would be really important tonight to also note that this is a movement that has been built on the convention, and a convention that is about to be 25 years old, the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And I'm so honored to be able to say tonight that we also have Landon Pearson, who has been one of the great champions of this, and one of the reasons that we're actually all in this room able to do this work. And based on that, we're going to really keep going. We're all committed to sharing what we've learned to grow this particular movement around the right to play, and to support the creation of stronger programs by using learned people who are leading us on the academic front, and who are in the trenches working on the ground with the teachers, with children. And we're going to work to create better policies which are going to allow all children and youth to participate in sport and play-based learning programs. The Aga Khan Foundation of Canada is a strong supporter in the importance of harnessing the power of play for learning, and we cannot thank them enough for hosting this event, for their leadership on this issue, and for hosting us tonight in this incredibly beautiful space. And I want to thank as well to our moderator, Christy Kirkup, and we want to thank you for guiding us so skillfully through this dialogue this evening and for your inspiring remarks as well, and so pleased that you have made that link between teaching and journalism, and you can continue to teach us here in Ottawa every day. So, and you're a very, very great champion for education, but also for play-based learning, and we can't thank you enough for your time and your support tonight. I want to thank all of our inspirational speakers for taking the time to share your work, your experience with us tonight, and your own very private thoughts around this. This is really important, and I think we're at the beginning of something very new. And your thoughts and all of this tonight was so well appreciated. Your work on the ground is at the heart of what we do every day, and we're very, very grateful for what you do every day for children, for youth, and for the families the world over. And to our student leaders tonight who came all the way to engage us in those play-based learning activities. Some of them have left, but I think it is so important for us to thank them for engaging us at the very beginning of this session. And you're already the leaders that are making great impacts in your schools and in your communities. And I want to thank you so much for the energy that you brought and the enthusiasm for tonight, but also for showing us the impact of sport and play and for learning in action. And you are doing this in your schools, and we're so very grateful. And to close, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight and encourage you to continue learning more about this issue, this complex issue, to get involved and, most importantly, to play. So thank you very much, and good night.